1 year ago today, a speck of light appeared in images from a telescope in Chile that no astronomer had ever seen before, moving too fast and at the wrong angle to be from our solar system. It was a visitor from another star, a comet that formed 10 to 12 billion years ago, before our own sun existed, and has been traveling between the stars for most of the universe's history. The June jobs report came out this morning, and it's weaker than expected, which puts the Federal Reserve's new chair in an even tighter corner than the one he was already in. And Belgium beat Senegal 3-2 last night with a VAR penalty and stoppage time, so controversial that Senegal's squad was in tears on the pitch, which means the United States plays Belgium tomorrow in the World Cup round of 16, knowing their opponent just survived a situation they probably shouldn't have. Let's get into all three. Start with the comet, because today marks 1 year since one of the most extraordinary things that has ever happened in the history of human observation of the cosmos, and it received roughly the coverage of a moderately interesting nature documentary, and then was largely forgotten by everyone outside the astronomy community. 2025, the NASA-funded Atlas Survey Telescope in Rio Hurtado, Chile, detected a small, fast-moving object in the sky that immediately alarmed astronomers. It was moving too fast and at too steep an angle to be gravitationally bound to our sun. Its trajectory, when traced backward through time, didn't originate from anywhere in our solar system. It was traveling at approximately 137,000 miles per hour when discovered, faster than anything born in our neighborhood would ever move at that distance. Within days, the scientific community confirmed what no one had managed to see clearly twice before. This was the third interstellar object ever detected, passing through our solar system. They named it 3I Atlas. I want to explain what interstellar means here, because from another star system is the kind of phrase that can wash over you without landing. The solar system has existed for roughly 4.6 billion years. During that entire time, we have been able to directly observe, study, and physically interact with material only from our own system, the same rocks, ice, gas, and chemistry that all formed from the same ancient cloud of material around our own sun. 3I Atlas came from somewhere else entirely, in a different region of the galaxy, formed under conditions that exist nowhere near us. The first interstellar object, Oumuamua, zipped through in 2017 before anyone could get proper instruments on it. The second, 2I Borisov, came in 2019 and gave astronomers a somewhat better look. 3I Atlas arrived in 2025 with more warning, moving at a trajectory that gave every major telescope on Earth and in space a genuine opportunity to study it before it disappeared back into the void it came from. What the last year of observations has revealed is stranger and more ancient than even the initial excitement suggested. The James Webb Space Telescope turned its instruments on 3I Atlas and found methane in its coma at roughly 11 times the concentration of any solar system comet ever measured. The Atacama Large Millimeter Array in Chile, used by a team led by University of Michigan doctoral candidate Luis Eduardo Salazar Manzano, measured the deuterium content of 3I's water and found it more than 40 times higher than the deuterium-to-hydrogen ratio in Earth's oceans, and more than 30 times higher than any solar system comet ever measured. Deuterium is a heavier version of hydrogen, and its ratio to regular hydrogen in water is a chemical fingerprint of the temperature conditions in which that water formed. What those measurements tell scientists is that 3I Atlas formed somewhere extraordinarily cold, colder than any place in our own solar system where we find comets, far from the warm inner zone of its star, possibly in the equivalent of our solar system's outer Kuiper belt, but around a much different star, with much different conditions. The new JWST analysis published on June 22nd, and a preprint based on Webb data posted to archive.org just 4 days ago, adds another layer. The silicate structure of the dust in 3I's coma points specifically to formation in the cold outer reaches of its parent star's protoplanetary disk, the ring of material that eventually solidifies into planets and moons. And based on the carbon and hydrogen isotopes measured by both ALMA and Webb, scientists now estimate that 3I Atlas is between 10 and 12 billion years old. Our Sun is roughly 4.6 billion years old. The universe itself is approximately 13.8 billion years old. Martin Cordner, a NASA researcher who led part of the JWST study, described it as an ancient object, probably predating our Sun and solar system. The star it came from, the star whose gravitational influence eventually flung this comet toward our corner of the galaxy, no longer exists. It burned out billions of years before life appeared on Earth. Salazar Manzano described why this matters in terms worth sitting with. Interstellar objects are time capsules that bring material from the environments where other planetary systems formed. And our measurements are finally allowing us to open those time capsules and peek at the physical conditions where these objects originated. Dennis Bodowitz, a professor of physics at Auburn University, who led a separate study using NASA's Swift Observatory, added the dimension that's most relevant for anyone thinking about life beyond Earth. When we detect water, or even its faint ultraviolet echo, from an interstellar comet, we're reading a note from another planetary system. It tells us that the ingredients for life's chemistry are not unique to our own. 3I Atlas has now crossed beyond Jupiter's orbit on its outward journey. By the early 2030s, it will have left our solar system entirely. It will spend the next several billion years as what it was before, a frozen relic of a dead star's planetary system, drifting silently between the galaxies. This particular one happened to pass close enough to us, moving at the right time, for us to have the instruments to notice it and read its story. It did so just once. That's the thing about this that I keep returning to. We get exactly one look at each of these visitors, in exactly the window our technology happens to exist, and then they're gone forever. Whatever the data from 3I Atlas tells us about chemistry, about planet formation, about whether the building blocks of life exist around other stars, we won't be able to go back and ask the source for a second opinion. The observation window is permanently closed. 1 year ago today, it opened for this one, briefly, because one telescope in Chile happened to be pointed at the right piece of sky at the right moment. That was the universe's longest story. Here's one with a much shorter timeline. This morning, the Bureau of Labor Statistics released the June jobs report. Payroll gains came in well below the 100,000 economists had predicted. CBS News confirmed the headline as much lower than the 100,000 new hires that economists had predicted. And that's the number now sitting on Kevin Warsh's desk 2 days before the 4th of July, 2 weeks before the Fed's next scheduled meeting. Let me build out why this matters more than 1 weak month normally would. The May jobs report, which I covered at the start of this month, came in at 172,000, a blowout that I specifically noted was being driven primarily by leisure and hospitality, the World Cup-adjacent sectors that were hiring heavily for the tournament's first weeks. I flagged at the time that the World Cup seasonal boost was a one-time effect that would not persist into the summer's later data. It didn't. June, by the preliminary reading, has corrected significantly below what the structural trend would have predicted without the tournament's temporary boost. That creates a specific analytical problem for the Federal Reserve. The dual mandate, maximum employment and price stability, is supposed to function as two goals pointing in the same direction most of the time. When the economy is strong, inflation tends to run higher, and the Fed tightens. When the economy weakens, inflation falls, and the Fed eases. What Warsh has right now is a situation where both signals are simultaneously pointing at a response the other signal can't support. Inflation from the Iran war's energy shock is still running at 4.2% from the May CPI print, significantly above the 2% target, arguing for rates to stay elevated or move higher. And now a softer June jobs reading is arguing for the opposite, the kind of support that historically accompanies a rate-cutting cycle. Warsh's philosophical instinct, which he made clear in his first press conference last month, is that supply shock inflation should be looked through rather than fought with rate hikes, because hiking rates doesn't produce more oil or clear mines from a shipping lane. What it didn't account for is what happens when the supply shock's direct inflation effects coincide with a genuine softening in the labor market at the same time. Looking through the inflation becomes more complicated when employment is also starting to look through its own floor. The FOMC meets July 14 to 15. That's 11 days from now. Between today and then, the July 4th weekend, which will produce the most politically visible set of economic optics of the year, including the official White House 250th birthday speeches and celebration. Any perception that the economy is weakening has unusually high political salience this week, because the administration's messaging about American prosperity at the 250th anniversary is already being built. A soft jobs number on July 3rd, the year you're throwing a national birthday party, is, among many things, awkward timing for the political framing. I'm not going to project what Warsh does on July 15th based on 1 month's preliminary data. But the direction of the economy's most watched indicators over the past 6 weeks, from the May CPI at 4.2% to the dot plot that flipped toward a projected hike to a June jobs report that is weaker than expected, describes a Federal Reserve inheriting an economy that is simultaneously too hot in one dimension and too cool in another, with a new chair who has publicly committed to not signaling forward guidance too clearly. Watch July 15th. That's where the actual decision about which of those two signals the Fed responds to will be made visible. And now the sport, because what happened last night at the World Cup deserves real attention, not just as entertainment, but as preparation for anyone watching the USA-Belgium match tomorrow. Belgium came into last night's round of 32 match against Senegal as the narrower favorite, but Senegal's first half was genuinely exceptional. By halftime, Senegal led 2-0 and was playing with the kind of defensive organization and counter-attacking precision that had beaten them exactly 0 times in this tournament. Senegal's Sadio Mane, playing what he's described as his final major international tournament at 35, was commanding. Belgium looked disorganized and short of ideas. Then the second half happened. Belgium pulled one back in the 61st minute, and the match changed character. With Senegal defending deeper and time ticking away, Belgium poured forward with increasing desperation. In the final minutes of stoppage time, a Senegalese defender handled the ball inside the penalty area on what the referee, consulting VAR after initially waving play on, ultimately judged to be a deliberate handball. The penalty was awarded. Belgium's Kevin De Bruyne converted it. 3-2. Belgium wins. Tournament over for Senegal. The reaction was fury. Senegalese players surrounded the referee. The Senegalese bench erupted. In the stands, Senegalese fans who had traveled from Dakar and diaspora communities across North America were in tears. Not just disappointed tears, but the specific, angry tears of people who believed something was taken from them by a decision that didn't reflect what happened on the field. Al Jazeera's match reporting described the late VAR penalty as leading to fury as Senegal blows 2-0 lead, loses 3-2 to Belgium in dramatic World Cup round of 32 exit. ESPN's analysts were divided, which in itself tells you something about the decision's legitimacy. A clear and obvious handball penalty doesn't divide professional analysts. An ambiguous one does. Here's why this matters for Team USA tomorrow. Belgium is not coming into this match with the confident swagger of a team that thoroughly outclassed their opponents. They survived. They played poorly for a half, fell behind by 2 goals, and required a VAR intervention in stoppage time to advance. That's psychologically complicated territory for any team. Simultaneous relief, adrenaline, and the knowledge that the margin between advancing and elimination was thinner than any scoreline suggests. The American team, by contrast, beat Bosnia-Herzegovina with the margin comfortable enough that the red card drama around Balogun was a subplot rather than a crisis. Balogun's suspension is real, and I don't want to minimize it. He's Team USA's most dynamic finisher, and the player whose movement creates problems that are hardest for opposing defenses to prepare for in limited time. But Belgium's defensive organization, which has been their historical strength, was exposed last night. They gave up 2 goals in the first half to a Senegalese team that, while talented, is not operating at the technical level of the top European sides. The U.S. forward line without Balogun is still capable of finding those weaknesses. The question is whether Jesse Berhalter's deployment of Balogun's replacement creates the specific angles of approach that Belgium's back four managed to close off for most of the first half against Senegal, but not the second. Tomorrow night, in whatever city this round of 16 match is scheduled, the United States is playing the exact opponent that the U.S. coaching staff was probably hoping to face, rather than Spain or France. Belgium is still formidable. Their midfield is still among the best in the tournament, and De Bruyne on his day is one of the finest players of his generation. But they came out of last night's match with less momentum than a clean, convincing victory would have provided, and the American team has at least the psychological advantage of having advanced on their own terms. I genuinely believe this team can win tomorrow. I'll say that plainly, rather than hedging it into meaninglessness. The American squad has depth. They're playing on home soil, they have the crowd, and Belgium just played 90-plus minutes of emotionally exhausting football after falling 2 goals behind in a knockout game. The circumstances favor the United States. What happens on the actual pitch is a different question, but the circumstances are good. 3 stories today, on the eve of the 250th birthday. A frozen traveler from a dead star spent a year showing us that water, chemistry, and the possibility of life are not uniquely ours. They come from billions of years before us, from systems we will never visit, and they pass through our neighborhood once and leave forever. The June jobs report added another data point to a Federal Reserve's impossible problem: an economy that is simultaneously running too hot on inflation and too cool on employment, with the biggest policy meeting in months 11 days away. And Team USA plays Belgium tomorrow in the World Cup, against an opponent that survived last night on a controversial decision they probably shouldn't have been in position to need. None of those stories are small. The Comet one will be the hardest to remember, which is why I'm saying it first today. The jobs number will move things on Wall Street and in Washington starting this morning. And tomorrow night, 90 minutes of soccer will either extend the greatest American World Cup run in a generation or end it while 1 billion people watch. It's July 3rd. Tomorrow, America's 250th birthday. Depending on your window. A genuinely strange moment to be alive and paying attention. There are worse vantage points.